It is 2:39 in the morning, and a freight train is moving through a sleeping town at 47 miles an hour. Nobody on board knows a switch a few hundred yards ahead has been left in the wrong position. In seconds, tons of steel will leave the rails, and a gas that helped win a world war will spill into the streets where people are sleeping. By sunrise, 9 people will be dead, and a town will not fully recover for years. This is the story of Graniteville, South Carolina, and the small, forgettable decision that caused it. Picture the setting first. Graniteville sits in the western edge of Aiken County, a quiet mill town built around a textile plant called Avondale Mills. Freight trains pass through constantly, day and night, carrying everything from steel coils to raw chemicals. One of those chemicals is chlorine, shipped by rail in heavy tank cars to keep the mill's water treatment running. It is dangerous cargo, but it is routine cargo. Trains carrying it had rolled through this town for years without incident. On the evening of January 5, 2005, a local Norfolk Southern crew finished a routine shift. Their job that day involved switching cars on and off a side track near the mill, a maneuver that meant temporarily rerouting a section of track away from the main line. When their work was done, they parked their train on that siding for the night. Standard procedure required them to return the switch to its normal position before leaving, so that any oncoming train would stay safely on the main line. They didn't. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, which investigated the incident in the months that followed, there was no mechanism in place at the time to remind a crew that a switch needed to be reset before they left the worksite. No alarm, no checklist step that couldn't be skipped, just a physical lever and the assumption that someone would remember to move it back. Nobody did. The crew went home. The switch stayed locked in the wrong direction, and the parked train sat quietly on the siding, waiting. Hours later, in the deep dark of early morning, a different train approached. This one wasn't stopping. Norfolk Southern Freight Train 192 was moving through Graniteville at cruising speed, its crew expecting a clear main line ahead, the same clear main line that had been there every other night. There was no way for them to know, from the cab of a moving locomotive at 2:39 a.m., that the track beneath them had quietly been rerouted hours earlier by a switch nobody had reset. You're the engineer in that cab. Everything looks normal. The night is dark, the signals are unremarkable, and the train is running exactly the way it's supposed to. Then the track curves somewhere it shouldn't. The misaligned switch diverted the oncoming train off the main line and directly onto the industry track, straight toward the parked train sitting there since the night before. There was no time to stop. The NTSB later calculated that the distance needed for the crew to spot the misaligned switch, react and brake safely, was longer than the distance they actually had. By the time the danger was visible, physics had already decided the outcome. The two trains collided. 16 cars from the moving train derailed, along with both locomotives. Among the derailed cars were 3 tank cars loaded with chlorine. One of them ruptured. Chlorine gas is heavier than air. Once it escapes, it doesn't rise and disperse the way people might expect from a leak. It sinks. It pools low to the ground, following the terrain, drifting into low points, seeping through doors and windows into homes where people are sleeping without any warning that the air around them has changed. Around 90 tons of it began spreading outward from the wreck, rolling through the streets of Graniteville while most of the town was still asleep. Chlorine reacts with moisture. Your lungs are full of moisture. When chlorine gas is inhaled, it converts almost immediately into acids that damage the delicate tissue lining the airways and lungs, causing intense irritation, swelling, and in severe cases, fluid buildup that can be fatal. It is exactly why chlorine was weaponized during the First World War, and exactly why, generations later, it can still turn an industrial accident into a mass casualty event without a single flame or explosion involved. The train's engineer, along with 8 other residents, did not wake up in time. They died from chlorine gas inhalation before help could reach them, some in their own homes, close enough to the derailment that the gas cloud reached them within minutes. As dawn approached, emergency crews began arriving to a scene that offered no clear starting point. There was no fire to contain, no visible wreckage that explained the growing number of people struggling to breathe blocks away from the crash site. Responders had to piece together, in real time, that an invisible gas cloud was the actual threat, not the mangled train cars themselves. Roughly 5,400 residents within a mile of the wreck were evacuated, some walked out by neighbors, some driven out in the backs of pickup trucks. In the middle of the night, in January cold, many with no real understanding of what chlorine gas actually does to the human body or how far it might travel. Local hospitals were suddenly flooded. About 554 people arrived complaining of breathing difficulty, and 75 of them were admitted for further treatment. A quiet mill town's medical infrastructure, built for ordinary days, was abruptly tested by a mass chemical exposure event with almost no warning. Researchers Ann Dunning and Jennifer Oswalt, writing later in the Transportation Research Record, studied Graniteville specifically because of how unprepared the surrounding infrastructure was for an evacuation nobody saw coming. Their analysis pointed to a difficult truth. Even though chlorine tank cars rolled through this exact town every single day, most residents had no idea what to do if one of them ever ruptured. There was no public education campaign about sheltering in place versus evacuating, no clear communication about which decision protected you and which one didn't. In a crisis where the wrong choice could cost someone their life, most people were simply guessing. The National Transportation Safety Board's final report placed the cause plainly. The collision happened because a crew failed to return a mainline switch to its normal position after finishing their work. That is the entire mechanical root of the disaster, not a design flaw in the tank car, not a failure of the chlorine industry broadly. One switch left in the wrong position on one ordinary night. The safety board's investigators went further, though, and this is the part that matters most. They didn't stop at blaming the individual crew members. Their report specifically noted that there was no mechanism, no redundancy, no fail-safe reminder built into the process that would have caught this single human oversight before it became catastrophic. The system relied entirely on memory, and memory, under the ordinary fatigue of an ordinary workday, failed. The board also examined the tank car itself, the one that ruptured, and found something uncomfortable for the rail industry to hear. That particular car was among the strongest tank car designs in service at the time, built to withstand exactly this kind of impact under normal operating conditions. It still failed. Investigators concluded that even some of the sturdiest hazardous material tank cars running on American rails could be punctured in collisions occurring at only moderate speeds, not extreme ones. That finding alone pushed for renewed scrutiny of tank car design standards across the entire industry, well beyond this single accident. In the years afterward, Graniteville changed in ways that outlasted the headlines. Avondale Mills, the textile plant the rail line existed to serve, struggled in the disaster's aftermath and eventually closed its doors permanently, a loss that reshaped the local economy far beyond the immediate emergency. The switch that failed became a footnote in federal safety recommendations, calling for better warning systems and, eventually, for wider adoption of positive train control, technology designed specifically to prevent a train from being routed into exactly this kind of danger, even if a human being forgets a single step. Here is the reframe. It's tempting to imagine industrial disasters as the result of dramatic failures, massive design flaws, reckless corner cutting, obvious warning signs ignored for profit. Graniteville wasn't that. It was a tired crew at the end of a shift, forgetting one lever on one ordinary night, with no system built to catch that single human moment before it became irreversible. That's the quiet, uncomfortable truth sitting underneath most disasters like this one. It usually isn't one dramatic failure. It's one small, forgettable decision made by an ordinary person doing an ordinary job in a system with no safety net wide enough to catch it. It is 2:39 in the morning, and somewhere, a switch is sitting exactly where the last person left it. Whether that matters at all depends entirely on whether anyone built a system that remembers, even when a person doesn't.